Welcome to Casting Nets. I am one of your hosts, Pastor Dave Rudot. I am joined here with our other co-host, Pastor Will Harley.
Hello.
And we have a special guest today, Mrs. Rochelle Manzano, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And she's got a lot of really cool acronyms at the end of her name. She is, I can figure out the LMFT, Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist. That one was right?
You got it.
But what are some of the other acronyms that you have?
Sure. Some of the other acronyms that I have behind my name is, we say it as SACIT, S-A-C-I-T. That just stands for Substance Abuse Counselor in Training. It just means that there's some requirements that I haven't met yet in order to be considered a licensed substance abuse counselor. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And this is a therapy approach that has been proven to be very successful in helping with people with trauma. Actually, the VA recognizes it as a leading therapy approach for veterans. And then BCTMH stands for Board Certified Telemental Health.
Oh, cool.
Telemental health. Yep, it just means that I've taken classes to be the best therapist over telehealth as possible.
And you are a licensed marriage and family therapist in Appleton and at two of our area Lutheran high schools, at Fox Valley Lutheran High School, is that correct? And Manitowoc Lutheran High School?
Yep.
Your alma mater, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's really, we're really pleased to have you here with us. And I just as a way of introducing yourself to our listeners, in 1 minute, could you tell us why you wanted to be a licensed marriage and family therapist?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And once I fell into the profession, I realized how passionate I was about it. I can't tell you that when I was 18, I knew that this is what I was going to be, but God has a way of leading us to where he needs us to be in life, right? And I guess the thing that kind of started it was just kind of seeing people in my family struggling, more specifically in divorce. And that's probably what led me to go towards the marriage and family therapy side of it, not the licensed professional counselor. And really my one main thought was, if I can help anybody not have to struggle through what I saw in my family, like, that would be a great goal in life.
That is an awesome vocation, and it is a sorely needed one as far as we see of all the broken families that we have, and the topic for today, which is our teen mental health. And before we get into our topic, we, of course, need a disclaimer.
And our disclaimer is, as usual, the things that we discuss on this show is now a broadening discussion, not only of two pastors who are just spouting off what's at the top of their head, but also now an actual trained professional who will be adding some depth to our conversation and actual facts to what it is that we talk about. But if there are things that are said in the broadcast, please realize we are not intentionally trying to aggravate you, but you can turn us off, come back later, fast forward a little bit over what we have said so that you're not
Especially the things that I say, right?
Well, it depends. He's in a mood today.
Yes, I am in a mood.
But as we do go along, we do want to uphold the teachings of our church bodies that have called us, as well as the teachings of our Lord in his scriptures and in the confessions. And so please hold us accountable to those things. But everything else are just our ramblings and our thoughts as we live our life here in faith and have an opportunity to share that faith with you. And so I will have some music, and we'll get into our topic, yeah?
If anybody, this is also meant to be this is me being in my moods of trying to keep things professional. And that is that this is a podcast that's meant to be a beginning of a conversation, not the end. It's not just meant to be our ranting, but an opening of a topic and of a conversation. Please have a conversation with us, Pastor Will Harley at St. John and Maribel, or at Emmanuel and Shirley. Most of our feedback we get is from in person, but you can also go to our Facebook page and contact us that way, or you can email us at castingnetspod@gmail.com.
And we have that new we're on a new server.
Yeah,
right?
we're on a new
Podbean.
Podbean, yep.
Yeah, they took our money.
So so if your podcast, you probably don't notice this if you are automatically subscribing to your podcasting platform, but if you are going to a web page, you're going to have to go to put a different a link on your favorites.
Yep, absolutely. All right, here we go.
Teen mental health is the topic for today, and as we're speaking with Rochelle, is that okay if I call you Rochelle? Or,
that would be great.
You can call us Dave, and you can call me Dave, and Will.
Yeah, we're not collective, Dave.
We're not collective. We don't identify as they. We are identifying as Will and Dave. Please feel free to do
Bob
that.
and Tom.
Bob and Tom, yeah. So back to the topic. A lot of times when people look at the teens and what's going on today, they'll just say, well, these are just a bunch of snowflakes, and they should take it on the chin like we did. And Rochelle, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, that's definitely probably things that are being said, especially in this Midwest community, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll admit I have said that to my own children, where they've complained and they have but whatever, and I'm like, you're just being a bunch of snowflakes. Just suck it up and move on. So, that's a good question.
Yeah, and mental health is an important issue. I mean, as you talked about early in the introduction, talking about how families are needing help to keep going, to keep in their vocation that God has called them to be in, and there can be strategies that we can use that help families stay together and help teens get through a very difficult time in their lives.
So I guess coordinating with this first question, though, I mean, this idea of snowflakes isn't new. I mean, it's really, I've started to hear this term being used in the last, and not just here in the Midwest, but, when we were in South Dakota as well, it was going around, 5-10 years ago. Where is this? I mean, is there just a drastic difference between the generations so much that there is this weakness that is really evident, or is this just a more awareness of mental health that's causing us older people to say, we never had to deal with that and suck it up? I mean, is that what's going on, or is there really a weakness that is being, probably a bad way to phrase the question, is there more of a problem now than there ever was, and that's what we're noticing? Or was there always this problem and now we're actually getting help for it, and the older people are like, no one helped me, so now I'm going to make fun of you? Does that make sense?
Yep. And like my response to that is probably a little of both, right? Like we can trace this all the way back to the fall of man, right? Where, and what you saw is you just saw the intergenerational themes follow from generation to generation from that point on, right? So I don't know if it's any different in that aspect. I do think that there are some environmental things going on today that probably contribute to maybe we're seeing more mental health stuff. It could be the food that we're eating, right? The way that we're making products and using them. I can't say that we can dismiss that either, right? But I'm going to use this example, and maybe this is an example that we're going to use throughout the whole podcast. I think I'm going to give two. One is going to be like, let's think about it from this aspect. If you break a bone, what do? You go to the doctor, right? You don't sit there and say, oh, I think my arm is just going to heal on its own. I think it will, but think about the problems that you're going to have based on that bone healing not correctly, right? Or a car. Let's talk about a car, right? We can talk about something smaller, a car that's leaking oil. Do you just keep driving the car, hoping that the problem is going to fix itself? No, you're going to take it into the shop, right? And say, hey, there's something going on. Let's look at it from a mental health perspective. If something is going on in your brain just like a broken arm or leaking oil, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I probably need some help. And I think that's where you come to the awareness, right? Of like, if something's not working right, or if I'm struggling mentally, let's get some help.
But I think, you know, that, and that's that is a really good illustration. And I think it's a good thing to start thinking about the aspects and different, you know, thinking it from a different way. But to me, approaching mental health, one of the things that I think makes it very, very difficult is, okay, so my son broke his wrist some years ago, and I walked in, and he would lift up his arm, and it's dangling. You can tell it's broken. Things it's not functioning right. I know I can look at my own wrist, and I can say, this is a normal wrist. That's not a normal wrist. That doesn't work. But when you look at mental health, I think at least the stigma that I can see in my own head is, and one of the things that's hard for me to understand is, I'm not exactly sure what a normal brain is supposed to look like, because I don't think anybody is what you could say normal. You know, we all have this different spectrum.
Sure.
I dealt with autism, people who had autism, and everybody is autistic to a certain extent. Some people are just on the spectrum better than others,
Yep.
and they're functional. I found that all people have obsessive compulsive issues. Just some people are more functional
Yep.
with it. And so when we look at mental health, the thing that I've always struggled with mental health is, what is the normal that we're looking at and saying, okay, you're not that, and so now you need help.
Especially for a teen.
Right. And that's my problem. Like when I look at my kids and I see that they all of a sudden break down in the middle of a store for some stupid reason, I'm like, okay, suck it up. Let's move on. This isn't a big deal. But is it a big deal? And how do I know if it's a big deal, and how do I don't know if it's a big deal? Because I look at it and I'm like, well, I look at it, that's not a thing for me to break down about, but it's a thing that they're breaking down about. But if I follow that course of logic, everything becomes something that's on this scale of, it's not normal for me, but it's normal for them. And so, you know what I'm saying? Where do we get this gauge? What is the gauge and the barometer of which we can say we've stepped over the acceptable and now we really have a problem?
Yeah, and like part of us being ethical as therapists is like, we do not push values, beliefs, ideas on our clients, right? And so who's to say that someone comes in and says, oh yeah, I had this really bad thing happen, when I was deployed, but I don't want to work on that. But their coping skill for that is to just avoid, right?
Well, that's men in general. Our coping skill, right?
Who's to come and say that particular person should get therapy for that, right? Maybe as a mental health provider, I'm going to look at it and say, maybe you're continuing that pattern, that intergenerational pattern that maybe isn't the healthiest, but if you're coping in life that way, that's their prerogative, right? So I'm going to say the one word that comes to my mind is impact. So, yeah, I see the face that you're making. It's, how is the mental health impacting that person's life? So your kid who maybe isn't handling stress the same way that you do, is it impacting their life or not?
So in a negative way?
Yes.
Okay.
Or you avoiding, is that impacting your family in a negative way? Maybe that's when you need to realize, not you specifically, but like the adult needs to realize, maybe I can live my life avoiding, but I don't want my family to have to live my life of avoidance. So it is really...
That becomes a really tough barometer, I
Yes.
would have to say, because, each person has... Mankind is very adaptable, and
Yes.
we can learn to live with a lot and learn to live around a lot. And so if you're going to use the parameter of impact and the parameter of what I can avoid and what I can work, it's really easy for me to say, I can work within this framework and I can work within this. I just think back to, sorry, I'm jumping, but I think back into generations where you had huge alcohol problems. within homes, especially with men coming home and they would drink a lot coming from work. They worked around it. I mean, families didn't say anything about it. There was the structure that said, nope, this is okay. We're managing, we're working, and they did. They worked their way through it, and nothing. No one ever thought anything of it. But now we look back and we're like, that was horrible. Why would anybody ever want to live like that? And so how much of again, not on our sheet, and I apologize, but it just brings it up. How much of the impact is the people around us are saying it's impacting me because I don't want to deal with it, and so I'm going to make you deal with it, as opposed to it's not something that couldn't be lived with. And I'm not saying that there aren't cases where, no, definitely, I think you need to get help. I'm just saying how much of it has been overblown because no one else wants to deal with it. We really don't want to deal with someone else's baggage.
Right.
So you need to get help because...
Well, and that's where I come back to that broken arm or the leaking oil. If you're looking back and saying, I can tell that my childhood impacted me today, why do I want to do that to my family? At that point, that's when you're noticing that the oil is leaking.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Yeah. Where
And
I'm
so
seeing the
it's
thing
not-
repeated, and
Yes.
I didn't necessarily like it, although I
Yes.
lived through it.
Yep.
Got it.
Okay. What are some of the other stigmas that teens have about approaching mental health issues in their own lives?
I think the biggest one is going to be judgment.
Oh.
Judgment by others, judgment by peers specifically.
Which
So
would
there's
be-
still a stigma there, even though we're living in a day and age where, I think mental health is becoming more of a thing, right? I mean, we have Mental Health Month. We have, those are more. So you're saying that still within the kid framework of the mind, that is a problem, that they're going to seek counseling.
Yes, I think it's across the board.
Really?
Yeah, and then as parents going into seeing and having their kids see somebody like you, the stigma would be, well, if it's not that big of a deal, only the big issues go to the licensed marriage and family therapist, but not just like you were saying, something. The way I'm handling this situation isn't right, or the way that I handled it as a kid, and now I see my own kid handling it. There's something wrong here. This could be fixed somehow, but I don't know how. Is that right?
Yeah, or even think about it. Like, how does it feel good for us to say, wow, we're continuing the same unhealthy patterns as our parents did to us, or even the thought of, what did I do wrong in my parenting that this is something that my kid is struggling with?
Well, and I guess in that final comment, I wonder if that is, I know it happens, but I wonder if that's a healthy way of saying, or a healthy way of approaching anything, to say, internalizing it and saying, I'm the cause of it. And I had this conversation this week with some of the members where I said, our natural tendency, one of my members said, I thought the me generation is gone. I said, I thought that generation had sort of grown up. And I said, every generation is a me generation, because the generation before, my parents were born in the 40s. My mom was born in 39, and my dad was born in the 40s. And I look at that and I'm like, that generation of people were, my kids are a reflection of me. So how you act reflects back on me. And then when I had my kids, it's like their success reflects back on me. That's all the me generation, right? So no matter what we have done in life, it's reflecting back on me. So the parents is the stigma, because my child is in need of counseling, that reflects poorly on me. So is that a parent problem or a child problem? Not a parenting problem per se, but a parent problem. That
I think it's a sin problem.
Of course. Why we're on a religious podcast and we talk about this? I thought you don't have any. I thought we don't talk about any religious things. No, I agree. It's a sin problem, and I yes, absolutely.
Our desire to not want to avoid those negative or feelings that just don't feel good, like, right, it's a sin problem that started long time ago. But one of the things, and this is maybe some insight, is one of the things is every action that we do has a positive and a negative consequence. Or we gain something from that action and we lose something from that action. And this is something that, like, when I go over this with clients, like, they'll be like, how do I gain something from internalizing the sadness that I feel that, like, my kids are a reflection of me? But if we think about it, the thing that is gained from that avoidance is not having to, like, not having to put it in front of your face like a mirror. Like, oh, that comes from me, right? So that's the gain that we can get as parents by not being willing to realize that maybe our child could benefit from some mental health treatment. It allows us to cover up our sins. It's hard to admit that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because a lot of the negative mental decisions that we make, or those traps that we fall into, are usually some avoidance issues where I don't want to deal with what's in front of me, so I will gain myself some time by ignoring it, or I'll gain myself some time by, the parents' case, going out to the bar and drinking a lot. Those kinds of things. That's what you.
So those are coping mechanisms.
Coping mechanisms
that we use that are actually not coping; they're just avoiding the issues.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you were bringing up talking about how some of our teens could probably use some mental health. What would we call them? Practices or counseling treatments of some sort. So I would assume that a person that would need that would be an at-risk person of some sort. Would you say every teen could use some mental health treatment?
I think everyone can benefit from mental health treatment.
Okay.
Adults and kids alike.
So do you deal more with at-risk? We looked at your bio and it said you were helping with at-risk. Could you walk us through, like, what makes somebody at risk, or is that, or just walk us through what that means?
Sure. In the organization that I worked at before I now work at Christian Family Solutions, we did a lot of work with, like, perpetrators, and one of that was just, like, teens in probably high school, 7th or 8th grade, that were starting to have some contact with law enforcement in the county that I was working at. And so they would try to do some preventative therapy measures to help kind of decrease the amount of I would say adults that were getting into the system, into the law.
So the at-risk were those people who had already started down this path of making some maybe poor choices.
Right. Yep. They were having some contact with law enforcement and things like that.
And now would you still consider, in today's society, with everything changing the way it is with mental health and probably the uprise in depression and things that you're seeing, and anxiety that are seeing in kids especially, would you consider that those kids are at risk now? I mean, they're not having the connection with maybe the law enforcement so much, but they're just with society, the way that it's shifting and the speed with which it's shifting and how people are getting forgotten. Would that be a considered, I guess?
There are some indicators that, that show that maybe someone is struggling with mental health issues. So I guess if you see those indicators, they could be kids that are at risk.
So what are those indicators?
So I'll talk about indicators for teenagers specifically, but, it wouldn't be hard to take them and kind of, connect them to even in adulthood or whatever. But and again, this is something that I talk about with the teens at the beginning of the school year, because I want them to be aware themselves, right? But I talk about, like, if they're noticing change in school performance. So I'm not saying that a C student is also going to get a C minus. I'm talking about an A student all of a sudden starting to get C's. So you have to take, like, where they're at and then base it off of that, right? Judge it off of that. Having excessive worry or fear. Excessive worry or fear can also lead to sleep issues So having a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep. It can also lead to eating habits. So like anxiety can like lessen our appetite, or depression can lessen our appetite. So again, it's not that they would normally eat one hamburger and now they're eating almost all of it. It's they would usually eat 3 hamburgers and now they're eating 1, right? So that kind of indicator. Extreme mood changes. That one's hard though.
Yeah, with teenagers.
For the age that they're in. But it's the extreme, right? It's well, this is how they typically have mood changes. It's changed a lot from those typical mood changes. Avoiding friends or social media, or like isolating. So they used to go to every football game, and now I can hardly get them to go to 2 or 1.
So if they avoid social media, wouldn't that be a good thing?
Again, it's the baseline, right? Where's their baseline, and how is it changing from that?
But I mean, like if your child, and I know this happens because I've been seeing it on Facebook and some adults as well. But if they just say, okay, I'm done with social media. I don't like what it's making me into. That wouldn't be necessarily a trigger.
No, that wouldn't be a trigger. It would be, it makes me sad to look at what my friends are doing and that they're not inviting me. And so I'm just going to get off of social media. Or, yeah.
Okay.
It's the intention behind it. It's if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. Is the intention because I want to make myself better and I don't like the way that I'm feeling when I go on there and what I'm seeing? Or is the intent of no one likes me anyway, I don't get enough thumbs up on my page, and even though YouTube has taken down the dislike, I don't get enough likes so I know they dislike me. So that would be a trigger maybe of depression or something. Mm-hmm. An indicator.
Yep. Yeah, you have to think about it. It's not a black and white, right? You have to think about it from that perspective. Let's see. And then probably the other thing that I talk about is, we call them somatic symptoms, but it would be physical symptoms that present because of mental health issues. So stomach aches or headaches. Those are probably going to be the 2 most common things. And again, it's not black and white. I mean, a teen may have an actual stomach ache, but it's every morning before school starts, Mom, I don't think I can go to school. I mean, I was never this way, but I know, well, I can tell you, like, I'm not a swimmer. And so every Friday that we had swimming, I had a stomach ache because I didn't want to go to swimming lessons. Yeah. Right.
Well, I can tell you every morning when I had to wake up and have Latin as first class in university, I had a headache.
Yeah.
And then it came back with Greek. Hebrew.
Do you find that what do you find is the major cause of anxiety, or we talked about all these triggers in teens in Northeast Wisconsin?
Yeah, so anxiety specifically, I kind of came up with 2 things that kind of I come across a lot. And we're going to kind of hit that social media thing again, right? Like the social media comparison trap. It's the filters that are out there, or the ability to make things look like other people's lives are perfect.
Well, isn't that because most people only want to put the good things on social media?
Right.
So it's not the true self.
Right. Well, I had heard, and maybe you see this in your counseling, but I had heard from an article that kids have a social media page that is for the public, and then they have a back social media page that is only for the close friends that really they get to tell what's going on. Do you see that in your?
I don't know that I hear about that a lot.
Yeah, I've never heard of that either.
Yeah, I'd heard that there was.
To me, it's surprising that they'd actually be using Facebook, because there's so many other social media things that they can be using.
Well, no, not that. I'm not saying that it was just Facebook. It was that they would have like
like a
a
Snapchat.
public, public presence where they would have everything that was, look at me, I'm so glamour, that kind of stuff. And then they would have the background one where it was only for the one or two people that they're really close to, and they could say what they really wanted to say. So
social media was one source of anxiety.
Yep.
What's the other one?
And I, just to give an example of that, I have a funny story, and I think I can share this because my husband will laugh about it. But we have an international student that lives with us. And then we have a son and a daughter, and my husband's the shortest of the boys. And so they were getting ready for the winter dance. And like my husband got a stool and stood on it because he wanted to be the tallest. And when you take the picture, he looks the tallest.
Right.
Why? Because you don't see the stool in the picture, right?
Sure.
And that's kind of that example of like, I can do what I need to do to make it look like how I want it to look.
Sure.
So appearances then.
Yeah.
And then you said there was another cause of anxiety?
I would say negative thinking.
Okay.
Negative thinking, and I can see it manifest in different ways. Perfectionism. It probably the negative thinking, that's how, it also connects to that social media, like, right? Like my life is good enough. I don't have as many friends. But like God didn't make us all the same. Right. And that's what makes it difficult. It's okay. Like you don't need as many friends, but because social media, because society, maybe that's a better way to say it. Society values certain things. The people that have, are built different, they feel like they are missing out.
Well, and I guess, this is one of those things my brother went through later on in his life, kind of went through some mental health issues, and he had to go in for counseling. And that was one of the things that I know that was brought up, and he had brought to the family that he had lived the majority of his life under the shadow of, I went to school, I had to accomplish, I had to learn the way that the school was teaching me to learn, and he couldn't. He had learning disabilities that prohibited him from doing that sort of thing. And it created a stigma in him that this is how I have to be, but I can't be that way. And then when he got out, he ended up joining the military, and the military threw him into a shop class and told him take apart an engine. And he's like, all right. And he took apart an engine without reading a book and put it back together with some other parts, but it worked. And so, but I think I understand what you're saying in the sense that there's a perfectionism that I think we create within our society because we want everybody to have a standard. And we try to get everybody to reach that standard. And there are some people that, and I'm not trying to belittle anybody, that's not what I'm trying to say. Each person has their own gifts, and not everybody is going to be a fabulous reader, and not everybody is going to be the intellectual, and not everybody is going to be the mathematician when we're in the society of let's push STEM research and things of that nature. Not every, some people are destined to be the garbage men and do it very, very well and love their job. And some are destined to be the carpenter and whatever the case may be. So do you think that some of that negative thinking, this brings up to my question, do you think some of that negative thinking is not necessarily their fault, but it's because this perfectionism is pushed onto them by a system that says you have to fit into this mold? This is the mold of the system that we want so that we can gauge where you are.
I definitely talk with my clients about societal values and how they can differ from biblical values. And, we work on finding their truth. And I find that when people are able to find their truth, like, a lot of the anxiety or the worry decreases, or the sadness around not being able to meet whatever that negative thinking they have. And again, it goes back to the devil, right? Like the devil knows exactly what negative thoughts we all need to be thinking.
So
when you say like their truth, you mean the idea of God has given them gifts and God has given them a calling. Right. That's what's true, not what society says. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
I was just going to say, I'm like, because I think people like to use that word, your truth, and mean that it can be your own, whatever morals you want, whatever lifestyle you want, whatever, fill in the blank and say whatever you want. But I don't think that's what you're saying.
No. Yeah. It's and that's one of the reasons I love working for Christian Family Solutions, because we have so many people that are looking for that type of addition to therapy, and so it's real easy to say, let's look at it from what the Bible says, or what does God say in the Bible. There's actually a book out there that I like to recommend called The Lies We Believe. And
I think we did a study on that, didn't we? Oh, that was another one.
Yeah.
Oh, and it talks a lot. It's not WELS based, but the book isn't. But the author basically takes common lies that we as humans believe, and then uses the Bible to back up what are the biblical truths of those lies.
Well, and I like the way that this this part of the conversation is going, just in the sense that I think we in our society confuse our gifts and how we are set up to have different gifts to do different things in life, and we confuse that with how sometimes people say, well, God told you, or we give the impression God forces you to do this and that, but he doesn't. He gives the general, he says, here's how we should treat each other. Here is how we should live. Here is how God desires our life to be in Christ at the foot of the cross, and offering forgiveness. And then how do you live in that in service to someone else is going to be different than someone else's way of doing that. And I think there is something to be said about being able to split that up and saying, okay, God has general standards for how we treat each other. And then God also gives you freedom in the gospel to be a person in service to someone else in these different ways. And I think that would, my personal opinion, relieves a lot of that perfectionism, because...
Right, because then you're not comparing yourself to what everybody else's gifts are. You're saying, these are the gifts God has given me, so how am I going to work on those, to give the most glory to God, right? You have someone that has very strong musical talent. You don't want them trying to be the best athlete, right? You want them to see their value in the fact that God gave them the musical gifts, and vice versa. If he's given someone athletic talent or ability, they want to focus on that. They don't want to. But what's happening is they look and say, well, so and so made this elite singing group. Why can't I? Well, it's because God gave you the gifts to be a really good athlete, or vice versa. I wish I could be in every sport, and I'm not making the team. So
this actually, it just came into my head as a question following that. Is there, do you see in teens, maybe especially, this stigma of, there are certain people in school that are really good. Why can't I be really good?
That same thing.
Yeah. Or really good, like everybody should be able to, I guess, sorry about it, me not formulating it very well. My wife does this, where every now and then we'll hear like a singer and she'd be like, well, I could do that. But you can't. Like, well, she's not that good. I could sing like that. And I'm like, but you can't. And I'm wondering is that a problem in the teens, where they look at like maybe not everybody's going to be a superstar. Not everyone's going to be a professional athlete or whatever. But have we conformed our society to look at those people and say, you can, because you can be anything you want to be? And has that created us like a loop that and just the societal values, right? Like, you want to be the best athlete. Now, someone that is really good at caring for people, right? How is society valuing that? Right? They're not getting their pictures up on the billboards and stuff like that. And so society kind of can set those standards. And we talk about that a lot, like, let's figure out what your standards are, or what what is the biblical values or standards, and let's speak truth from there. So that then brings up further on in our conversation, when you have a system or a institution that has higher values as its background. So let's just use the Lutheran high school, any one of our Lutheran high schools as the standard. Do you find more people with mental health coming out of those institutions, or is it like wow, those are better? People seem to be a little bit more well-adjusted.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. I think that Satan is everywhere. So I don't, because I spent 3 days in a Lutheran high school, I don't get as much exposure to kids in the public school system. I think there's more exposure to things that we don't want our kids to be exposed to, but I think mental health stuff is everywhere.
So that you wouldn't say that there's necessarily a difference between kids in the Lutheran school or kids in any private school with more structure as opposed to another.
I think that we could maybe make the point that they are a little more well adjusted because they have that biblical background, but that doesn't mean that it's not there.
Okay,
Sure.
I get what you're saying, though.
Yeah. You would expect pastors not to struggle with depression because they are in the Word all the time, but yet that's what we see because the devil isn't going to leave us alone, or our sinful nature isn't going to leave us alone,
or our people don't leave us alone.
or people. In some cases, our people not leaving us alone. There's all and all the trauma that pastors deal with. So, and I can imagine with teens, it's even more so because they don't have their vocation yet. They don't have their calling yet. They're just trying to find their way in the world. And they're looking for the barometer, not found in Christ, but found in where am I in my society, my little society here at the school.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we've kind of looked at crisis. You had made a question, and I don't know if your focus is PTSD, but I know that was when we were talking about mental health. PTSD is another one that we hear probably on our pastor side. People claim that they have PTSD because the Packers lost, whatever. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what is true PTSD? I know this may not be necessarily on your spectrum of what you deal with, but could you maybe help a little bit with that before we move on to prevention?
Yeah, and actually one of my specialties is trauma and PTSD. That's where that EMDR that acronym comes from, just kind of being trained in how to help people who have trauma backgrounds. Yeah, so we have a diagnostic, the easiest way to answer that is, clinicians have a diagnostic manual that sets out the criteria for being able to diagnose with any diagnosis. So I can't meet with a client and say, oh yeah, you have generalized anxiety disorder because you're worrying a lot. Like there's multiple criteria that have to be met. And it's the same way with PTSD. And probably the hardest criteria in that manual for PTSD is that you have to have experienced some sort of life-threatening or be exposed to some sort of life-threatening event or something like that. And I don't think if the Packers lose
that qualifies
as experiencing or being exposed to a life-threatening event.
So I can imagine if you're in a setting where a teen is involved with law enforcement, that you would have a lot more PTSD things. That wouldn't be so much in our Lutheran high school. Is that correct? Or would you say, well, I suppose doesn't matter where you come from, the devil isn't going to let us alone. That doesn't mean you're going to have a traumatic event in the home as well. So I guess I correct my own question.
I probably wouldn't, I'm not going to find the diagnosis of PTSD as much in teens in the high school, but then there's another part of it, which is trauma triggers. That maybe you have some trauma triggers that maybe you can't be diagnosed specifically PTSD, but that doesn't mean that those trauma triggers aren't affecting or impacting your life.
Well, and I would say that, that's kind of a timely topic, right? Especially with what just happened in Texas. I mean, you probably have a lot of those kids who weren't in the vicinity of where the gunman was shooting, but they would have trauma triggers, I would assume, right? They weren't part of I saw him, he was firing, and the bullet hit the wall right above my head.
Right.
That would maybe be PTSD. Where
it could turn into it. And that's kind of where, if we go all the way back to the very beginning, about that original comment that you said about why, just get over it or whatever. And these are the gifts that God has given us. Some people just have the capacity to be able to just move on and others can't. And so It doesn't mean that those kids that were in that situation will for certain have trauma triggers. Some of them can have them, but some may be fine. And that's where we get to that point of like what you were talking before. How do we know when something's becoming a problem?
Well, let's talk about that. How do we know? Because I think myself as a parent of younger kids, I have a 13-year-old who is now starting to hit my moods are changing all the time. And social media is a big thing, and he has to connect with everybody and all the time. What are some of the, I guess, what are some good takeaway things that we can say, okay, as a parent, as a pastor, maybe even a teacher, we can say, I'm going to look out for X, Y, and Z. And maybe we talked a little bit about it when you had the indicators for teens, but is there anything, any other kind of maybe things that a parent can look out for and say, I want to look at this and maybe get them in for some help before it becomes a problem?
Yeah, I would say the indicators that we talked about earlier are probably going to be the biggest things that a parent can look for. Another thing is just keep trying. Maybe the word is trying to keep the lines of communication open, even at that age. And what I find the most is that kids want to feel heard. So we may not exactly agree with what they're saying, but if we're dismissive to them all the time, they're going to learn, like, I don't go to mom and dad to talk about these things.
So dismissive in the sense of I don't want to hear you, or dismissive in the sense of quit talking about that? Because I guess, what do you mean by dismissive?
Either. Or I'm busy, I'm making dinner right now, or I've got this thing. And it doesn't mean that, like, maybe you're in the middle of something important, but it's I really want to hear what you have to say, but I'm just at a place where, like, I'm not at a good place where I can stop what I'm doing. So can I come and talk to you about it later? Or it's why are you feeling that way? Or, like, diminishing, like, where their thoughts are, where their feelings are. Like, yeah, that's got to be hard. Like, again, we've been through that. We've lived through it. We know you're going to be fine. That's not what they really need to hear.
Well, now I have to rethink all my parenting choices.
That's always a good thing, isn't it? Always to reevaluate.
They need to hear, yeah, I can, because we can put ourselves back in that time, and we can know that it was hard for us, even though now we're beyond it and we know that we lived through it. What they need to hear is, yeah, that would be really hard. And hey, let me talk to you about, like, I was there at one point. But they don't want to be dismissed.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking of past conversations with my own son now, and how many times I said, yep, been there, done that, and I walked away. And now you're telling me I was wrong.
I'm not saying it's wrong.
I have to go back to my coping mechanism.
Avoid.
Just quit talking about it.
Change the subject. Make a joke.
But I'm talking about this in the context of, you want to keep those lines of communication open so that they come to you and they're able to say, like, I'm really having a hard time sleeping at night, or, I had some thoughts that maybe I don't want to be in the world anymore. Like, that's why the lines of communication are important.
So I guess following those lines of communication, and maybe just helpful tips. As a parent, I've kind of felt that it's my duty to regulate how many social media things my son gets on, and what kind of social media things he gets on. And my wife has felt that it's always good that I should follow my child on social media. Do you have thoughts on that when it comes to trying to keep a pulse on what's being said and how it's being said with our kids in these areas, as a help for being a barometer for mental health?
Yeah, I think that's really difficult, because there are things out there that we can't even keep up on as parents. I know that can be a little scary. I know I can sit there and be scared. But, you even talked about them having, like, a public social media account and then a private. So who's to say that they're not going to accept you on their public account, and then you don't even know that they have a private account. So it's just so vast that I think that you just have to, and then again, I'm going to go back to that lines of communication, right? You want to know that they're going to feel comfortable with you coming to you and saying, hey, I have something big that I want to talk to you about. Sure. My personal policy with my kids is that, like, I get access to any electronic thing that I want, right? And I mean, I
Yes.
will tell you that my son for sure has lost his phone for a couple days because he changed his password without telling me, and I wasn't going to give it back until he gave me the password, and I didn't feel guilty or bad.
Yeah, and I think we try to do that as well in the house, but I think the not feeling guilty as the parent to do what needs to be done, so that we're trying to keep it open and say, I'm not trying to snoop into your stuff. I don't want to control your life, but I have to, as a parent, be able to at any time know what's going on because I care about you. And not feel guilty about that, because I know my wife blames me and says that you're the one that all this technology stuff, and then whenever we have to discipline the kid, you're like, well, do they really have to have it taken away? Because I like my tech toys too, and so I'm a big culprit of that, but I feel guilty. I take my kid's phone away and they're moping around the house. I'm like, man, I think more I'm annoyed that they're moping around the house.
Yeah, parenting is not easy, and I will say it's not my job to be your best friend. It's my job to be your parent, and sometimes I have to make choices that are going to make both you and I feel uncomfortable, but I know it's for your best good, and so I'm going to do it.
Very good.
These are a lot of good pointers for parents in dealing with their teens, and the next thing I wanted to talk about was the Christian church and the teens within that church, and I have two questions for you. One was, what does the Christian church do well when it comes to teen mental health, and in what areas can it improve?
Yeah, this is, I don't know that I have the most insight into like the inner workings of the Christian church. I can just look at it from like how I see it from like my work at Christian Family Solutions. And I feel like one of the things that we keep talking about at Christian Family Solutions is how many churches are utilizing our MAP services. MAP stands for Member Assistance Program. It's basically an EAP version of therapy, like where your workplace will give you 3, 4, 5 sessions for free to go see a therapist. Any Christian church or Christian organization can sign up for MAP services with Christian Family Solutions, and then the church will provide the monetary funds for those sessions.
Yeah, and I can say that our congregation is a part of the MAP program. But one of the things that I found that the council said, and this is on just the council side, do you open that up to the members? Because if you open it up to the members, that could be a lot of money really quick. And that becomes that secondary question, right? It's a good system, but is that
I think
can it be sustainable?
It just depends on what value the church is putting on it, right? We have some churches that are very liberal with it. I think the intention behind it is that the congregation members reach out to their pastor, and they try to work through the things with their pastor. But if the pastor realizes like it's just above their training level, or maybe it's going to take more time than what they can afford, then that's when that referral to the MAP program would be for. And it's meant to be short term. So, right, like an EAP is 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions, and then you would continue on with your insurance. And that's kind of the same concept with MAP, is we will authorize, and that's the thing, like the church says this is how many sessions we're willing to pay for, 2, 3, 4, and then beyond that, it's up to you to decide, are you benefiting from therapy? Then you would have to move to insurance, or there's times that they say, we think we've gotten enough in those 4 or 5 sessions that we don't have to continue.
I like that approach.
Yeah, would you say that most of the MAP sessions would be more of the giving a strategy for looking at evaluating what's going on and saying, okay, how is this impacting my life, good and bad, and then implementing a strategy and a reframe of the issue rather than the current frame that was causing the anxiety or causing a difficulty in the family or difficulty among those, that you would have those troubleshooting reframes that help them equip God's people to, or anybody who's affiliated with the church and the MAP program, to move forward.
Right. Yep. That can be. It can also be a like what's the word I'm thinking of? An assessment, and saying like you probably need a higher level of care, whether it be like an intensive outpatient group or inpatient therapy or residential.
So I guess maybe for our listeners, as we come close to we got about 5 minutes or so, and we do appreciate all the time that you've given, and this is a very timely and important topic. I feel very, very comfortable and to send people who need help to a Christian counselor, because they're going to get, like we've talked about, yep, main problem, sin. This is, you get to live with that. But here's Jesus, and now how do we move forward? And so Christian counseling, I think, is just a fundamental. Can you, for our listeners who maybe have had zero connection with Christian Family Solutions, sort of give an idea of what types of things you could help the family with? Like, what do they offer on the level of help that if they're saying, I think I need that, I can go here? Sure.
I'm really going to start at the bottom and tell you that I've had parents, I'm going to use this example, parents who bring their child in saying, I want to just make sure that everything is going okay. And there's been 2 or 3 times that I've said, I don't see any indicators, right? I don't see any symptoms that would make me say that this person would have to continue in therapy. So like my thought is if there's a question, there's nothing wrong with reaching out, even if you meet with a therapist for one time. But if we go back kind of like to those indicators, right, it's going to be some of those things, and you can take those and you can apply those in adult terms, I guess. If there's a lot of conflict in the household or a lot of tension, that kind of goes back to that intergenerational pattern that continues over and over and over. So, we'll take a look at that. It's kind of looking back and saying, I don't want to pass this along, or this, every night we're all storming off to our own rooms and slamming doors. Like, it's just not a fun place to live, or I can't get any sleep at night because I'm thinking too much. It's anything like that. So
does Family Solution offer just counseling, or do they offer psychotherapists? They offer I don't know what the other terms would be. Psychologists, yeah. Things of that nature. Do they offer the whole gambit of what you could find in a secular type?
Yes, we do. We have therapists, which would be kind of like be the psychotherapists. We have psychologists, we have psychiatrists, and then we have prescribing providers as well, which are typically for us nurse practitioners. So, which is really nice, right? If I'm working with a client and they're saying, I think I just want to try some medication, let me make this referral for you over to our prescribing provider.
Wonderful. So really a family who might be in need, depending on whatever part of the scale they're on, they could find it there and be assured that, okay, we have a Christian organization that can help you so that you stay focused to what is really important with Jesus in your life, and yet will get you the help you need.
Right. And we offer different levels of care as well. So it can just be like you come in once a week, or it's the more intensive stuff. We even have a strong program where we go into the schools in the urban area in Milwaukee. We're a hugely growing organization.
Good.
And the website is?
www.christianfamilysolutions.org.
So even if you're not in the Northeast Wisconsin area, there's also a thing called telehealth. Can you tell us more about that, so it doesn't matter which state they're in?
Yeah, that is a little bit more complicated than that. We get licensed in states. Different states have different requirements, and so we would need to make sure that the therapist is licensed in the state that they're practicing.
Oh, okay.
Where the person is living.
So going to ChristianFamilySolutions.org, and that'll help filter what services can be done in which state.
Yep. You call the 1-800 number and the intake team knows all that information. But one of the ways that we do provide sometimes across state lines is through that member assistance program.
Oh, okay.
So if the church is part of the member assistance program, does that
Then
sort of cross
able,
that?
Yep, we're able to see, so like I'm licensed in Wisconsin. I could meet with someone in Minnesota.
Okay, through the member assistance program.
Through the member assistance program, once it moved to insurance, since I'm not licensed in Minnesota, then I would not be able to continue. Then we would look for someone in Minnesota who's licensed in Minnesota to work with them.
Okay. So wonderful. I think you have a wonderful job that you do in a practice. So thank you very much for everything that you bring to the people that you work with. Thank you for your time talking with us, because I think it helps, at least in a time when I look at people and I say, well, I could just say you're kind of nuts, and move on and not think about it. Maybe giving a little bit more time, at least for me, that's my takeaway. Give a little bit more time to this.
Yeah, my takeaway is that life is filled with anxieties and all kinds of things that can bring us down. Look at all the cool tools we have. We have our pastors who will help us. We have our Christian Family Solutions who can help us, give us strategies, and also, most importantly, give us Jesus as we are living our real life and having that living faith fed through Jesus and His Word.